Familiar faces, but more importantly, I see a bunch of entrepreneurs and a bunch of small business leaders. And I know all of you guys have spent a lot of time on your businesses. You've become experts in that field. And you also have to wear, as Lisa said, many hats throughout your business. So in my experience as an IT consultant, I've noticed that a lot of small businesses tend to overlook or gloss over a key aspect of their business, which is their IT systems. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to raise your business acumen for your IT systems, and hopefully you have a great takeaway. So the very first step here, as the slide indicates, is to get your head out of the sand and open your eyes. So what I want to do here is, with this slide, is elicit some fear.
You did it.
As you can tell with the badge, the biohazard badge, and I'll be sprinkling out fear throughout this presentation. I wouldn't be an IT person if I didn't do it. As you can see on the left-hand side, this is all pretty much well known. These are human viruses. We all know the consequences of these. Quite honestly, it's garnered a lot of media attention. On the right-hand side, we have computer viruses, probably a lot less well-known. Many of you probably have never even heard of them. What I want to do is draw a parallel here and just say that with our increasing dependence on IT in our businesses and quite honestly in our personal lives, these consequences are starting to affect our human well-being just like a normal virus would, like the Zika or Ebola. So with that, I want to tell you the impact that it's had. So a recent study indicated that 90% of all US-based cyber attacks have happened to small businesses. Let that sink in. So the 10% that you're hearing, the 10% that comes across in the media is from bigger, well-known, I mean, they may affect millions of people, but certainly it's not really affecting the vast majority of small business and business in the United States. The small businesses are the ones that are being affected. And they're being affected tremendously because out of that, the average is $36,000 per incident. Quite honestly, for me, that might be an annual salary for somebody. And furthermore, not only does it affect your wallet and your pocketbook, but it also affects your reputation. Because out of the survey, 31% of folks left an organization knowing that they got breached. And that's hard to repair. I'm going the wrong way, I'm sorry. So what I want to try to convey to you is that I think there is this myth of insignificance out there. This myth that says, you know, I just own a pizza shop. Who's going to want to hack me? I have nothing of value. You know, if you're connected to the internet, you absolutely have value to a hacker. And the reason you have value is really kind of two main categories. Number one, hackers love free computing power. They don't want to have to pay for it, and they want to kind of hide themselves. So your IT systems alone offer tremendous value, from the PC to, if you're a larger company, many servers. And secondly, you impose value on those IT systems, right? All of your information is on those IT systems. That client list may not be valuable to that hacker, but it's certainly valuable to you. And if it's valuable to you, then it's valuable to a thief. And I'll show you one way in which they can expose that. So the first way that your systems have value is through the system itself. And I've put up here a diagram basically of the value of a hacked PC. And you can see there's probably about 8 main categories. and it splinters off into some more detailed descriptions. And I'll go through a couple of them here real quick. So the first and foremost is a hacker uses your system to send out spam, because spam is prolific in the United States, and it's probably one of the best ways, or one of the biggest attack vectors that hackers can use to get you to click on a link, to get you to download some sort of virus, etc. So they get to use that as part of a network to send out spam. Secondly, it can also be used as a web server. Not only as a clone, like an actual web server serving up a rogue web page, but it can also house malicious payload. So unbeknownst to you, there could be a spam campaign that tries to get people to click on a link, and when they're downloading information, this malicious information, they could be downloading it from your computer. It goes without saying that they also can sort of look at all of the stuff that you do throughout the day. That is, if you go to financial websites, if you go to other accounts, and they can harvest that information, they can sell it for their own benefit, or they could quite honestly just use it themselves. I've seen both cases. And finally, I want to talk about the actual, how they take advantage of the actual value that you put into the system, your information. And this is one of the most prolific campaigns that they've had thus far, and that is called ransomware. And what ransomware does is it exposes the fact that you put value into that system. So while they may not want that client list, you do, and your business needs it. So what they do is they encrypt that data and hold it hostage until you pay up. Oh my gosh, I told you, everybody's somber here. Well, let me shed some good news for you, okay? I keep going backwards. Here we go. One of the things that we want to do as a small business is we want to demand metrics from our systems. How can you change if you don't know where you are? How can you be better? Demand metrics. We need to know a few key points of our IT systems. Number one, we've got to know if patching is up to date. Not only for our key operating systems, but also our third-party systems, Java and Adobe and all the other stuff that you have. Is it actually up to date? Because I'm going to tell you the vast majority of people aren't up to date, and they don't know if a patch failed or not. And that's how attackers get in. They exploit those vulnerabilities. That's the whole reason we have patches. Secondly, we got to know if our antivirus is working, it's up to date. I think that's a given. I think we have to know our anti-spam is working, our anti-malware. There's a bunch of these tools out there that guard against certain attack vectors. I think that is something we also have to gain knowledge about in our systems. And finally, we have to know the physical makeup. We all have physical machines, and we all are going to need to know if a hard drive is going bad, if a fan quit and it's going to overheat. All of that stuff these days can be reported right back to us before it happens. Finally, backups. If the disaster does happen, are you confident that you have a backup? And confidence is knowing that not only the backup occurred, but that you can restore effectively. So know your risk. Now that you've gained all of this information, all of these metrics, how do you have a plan for that? How do you have a plan of action? There's a lot of information that's coming your way. An IT provider can help, but here's, in my career as an IT consultant, one of the things I've noticed, I think I could boil it down to sort of really three main critical IT systems that small businesses have, and that's email access. They have the need absolutely for email because business is done through email. They need file access and internet access. Without these three things, or without one of these three things, you may find yourself with lost production. So when you find those critical IT systems in your organization, you're going to want to try to identify the single points of failure for those. In this example, I've identified that we need an email server that's working. We got to have the internal networking, that's the routers, the switches, the physical server. And also we rely on our vendors. And that for you, that could be Charter or AT&T or even your cell phone vendor. So when you've identified these critical aspects of your IT and you've identified your single points of failure, we need to have a plan to help mitigate that risk. And I'm not saying that you have to have a plan to have 2 servers and 2 ISPs and redundancy everywhere. That's not cost effective. But I think we can take advantage of a few tools and services out there currently on the market that allow us to mitigate our risk. If we look up here, software as a service is one of them. That's the SaaS. A great example of that is Office 365. Email has pretty much become a commodity these days. All right, they've gotten it to a point where it's super cheap, it's very reliable. Why not take advantage of a service like that instead of hosting it yourself? A lot of challenges come with that, hosting it yourself. Furthermore, you got to have a preventative maintenance solution. Now, I put my logo up there because my company is one of the companies that help you with a preventative maintenance solution. There are many out there. What we want to do is we want to give you those metrics. We want to help you make the right decision. And we want to help you plan and capacity plan for your IT. And finally, if all else fails, if you take away one thing, please take away this. Backup and disaster recovery are of the paramount importance. When all else fails, because it will, you have to have and be confident in your backup and your ability to restore from that backup. Disaster recovery is really measured in time. How quickly can you get up? And quite honestly, what can you stomach as far as downtime is concerned? Is it 2 days? Is it 1 day? If those critical business systems went down, how long could you have your business running efficiently? You think I'd be better at this by the end of the presentation. So in the Christmas spirit, let's wrap this up into a bow. All right? Yeah, nice. That's what I thought. I'm not wearing red, but let's wrap this up in a bow. The takeaway here is 3 main things to raise your business, your small business IT confidence. Number 1, you have to realize that you are a victim, that you are a target. Not a victim, you're a target. When you plug yourself into the internet, you're exposing yourself to attack. And while you may think that large businesses are really the target, or maybe financial institutions, you got to know that if you don't keep your systems up to date, it looks no different to an attacker on the internet. In fact, they go for those folks that are less likely to protect themselves. Number 2, you have to establish some sort of metric. You have to know what you're working with. And I think that's true with any part of your business, any aspect of that business. And once you figure that out, then you identify your risks and you control them. And you control them through an active plan. And it may not be the most expensive and redundant plan, but certainly a plan to make sure that you are taking the steps necessary to reduce your downtime. Now, with that being said, are there any questions?
I've got one. Thank you, Jared.
Yeah.
Paul Schneider with Cycle Bar. New business, All systems are cloud-based. Point of sale, Gmail, and financial. All third parties. How much risk is in those kind of systems versus doing email in-house on your own server?
That's a great question. I think the risk is kind of twofold. It depends on what you're asking. Is it the risk of downtime or the risk of breach? Yeah, I think the risk of breach is always there. A lot of companies, like I said, they always have a target, especially if they know, like a larger company, let's say there was a recent Yahoo breach where customers' information got harvested. And you know, in that case, they go after those individuals because of the content and the amount of content that they can glean from that. That carries a big price tag. So I would say, you know, within email, I think this is a great point. Within email, you want to make sure that you're doing email correctly, for instance, and that is to make sure that you're not putting all of your maybe personal identifying information. And if you're governed by HIPAA, you don't want to put PHI out there in email, because email is inherently insecure through the transfer and through at rest. And so companies are really just trying to catch up to make email a little bit more secure. But you know, I think the risk is always there and it's always present. But you also have to know that there's a larger company backing that organization, and so they typically would have security experts on staff trying to stay ahead of the curve. Contrast that with you trying to do it yourself. You may not always stay ahead of the curve.
Just a quick comment about backups. They're so important. Ransomware actually locked up my accounting. My brother, who's an IT professional, had us all set up, so we lost nothing versus the couple $1,000s that went for all our accounting backup to come back. So we just said, okay, fine, turned it off, and it was there. So backups are so important. So great point.
Yeah, I see it a lot. I'll tell you a quick story. I had an individual, it was a company that we do preventative maintenance for. 2 weeks ago, I got an alert at Friday at 8 o'clock, and it said that, you know, basically it was an alert alerting me to the fact that somebody might be breaking in to their systems. Sure enough, I got into it and stopped it within 15 minutes. Nothing happened. Then we did research all throughout that weekend, and by Monday they came to work and knew nothing of it. So it's very important that you have that, because if it does happen, who's going to react on your behalf?
Quick question, Jared. Great presentation.
Thank you.
As somebody with an IT background, you know, as you know, the chain is only as good as the weakest link. And one of the components I feel pretty strongly about is the user and their user education as far as how to deal with the stuff that they get in emails and so on. How do you guys approach that?
Yeah, that's important. With a small business, it's important to kind of dedicate a person that's a little bit more knowledgeable. We offer what we call like ISO services, basically internal security officer. And so we can come in and help educate with, in fact, just doing presentations like this and sending these out to your employees really help. But I think, you know, some of the biggest attack vectors really are the ones that need to be presented on for user education. Email is a great one. You just got to know, you got to always have that suspicion and not to click on that link and not to go to that website. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think it's very important to have that user education, and I think you can get it in a multiple variety of resources. And I think video is probably one of the best medium to do that. Okay, thank you.